The tent was still zipped from the inside. That's what Ranger Michael Torres noticed first when he pushed through the blackberry thicket on the morning of September 19th. The fabric was cold under his glove, damp from 11 nights of coastal rain, but sealed, completely sealed. The zipper pull hung on the interior side. He called out. No response. He called again. Then he opened it. Inside, a sleeping bag lay twisted against the far wall. A backpack sat upright in the corner, carefully positioned. A water bottle, a headlamp hanging from the tent's ceiling loop, still switched on but dead now, the batteries long expired. And on the nylon floor, written in what appeared to be eyeliner, were two words. He listens. 31-year-old Emma Coates arrived at Silverwood Campground in the Mount Hood National Forest on September 7th, just after 2 in the afternoon. She checked in at the ranger station, paid for 7 nights, and mentioned she was a writer working on a novel. She needed isolation, silence, the kind of emptiness you can only find hours away from cell service. The ranger on duty, a woman named Bridget Salinas, remembered her clearly. Emma seemed prepared. She had a detailed map, a satellite communicator for emergencies, and a calm, confident demeanor. She asked about wildlife. She asked about trail closures. She didn't ask about other campers. Bridget told investigators later that this stood out to her. Most solo campers, especially women, asked whether the campground was busy, whether they'd be alone. Emma didn't. Bridget also remembered that Emma had smiled when she said, "I'm looking forward to the quiet." Silverwood Campground is not a popular site. It sits 9 miles off the nearest paved road, accessible only by a deteriorating gravel path that discourages casual visitors. There are 12 designated campsites, but during the fall season it's common for the entire area to sit empty for weeks. The forest here is dense. Old-growth Douglas fir and western hemlock create a canopy so thick that even at noon the light arrives in fragments. There is no running water, no bathrooms, no fire rings. Campers are expected to be self-sufficient. Emma's site, number 7, was the farthest from the access road. It backed against a steep embankment thick with salal and vine maple. In front, a narrow clearing opened toward a dry creek bed. Visibility in any direction was limited to 20, maybe 30 feet. She set up her tent, a small 2-person dome, by mid-afternoon. A hiker passing through the area the next morning saw her sitting outside with a notebook. She waved. He waved back. That was September 8th. It was the last confirmed sighting. Emma's sister, Claire, tried calling her on September 12th. The call didn't connect. That wasn't unusual. Emma had mentioned she'd be offline. Claire sent a text, then another on the 14th. By the 16th, she started to worry. On September 17th, Claire called the ranger station. She explained the situation. Emma was supposed to check out on the 14th. She hadn't. Her car, a silver Honda Civic, was still parked at the trailhead. Claire asked if someone could check on her. Bridget Salinas hiked out to Site 7 that afternoon. She found the tent. She found the car. She called out. No answer. She didn't open the tent. Protocol required her to assume the camper had extended their stay or was out hiking. She left a note on the car's windshield asking Emma to contact the station. The note was still there on the morning of September 18th. Bridget returned with another ranger. This time, they checked the tent. It was empty. The sleeping bag, the backpack, the headlamp, everything was there. Emma was not. They initiated a search. Search and rescue deployed on the afternoon of the 18th. 12 volunteers, 2 trained dogs, and a helicopter scanning the surrounding ridgelines. They covered a radius of 5 miles, checking every trail, every creek bed, every fallen tree large enough to trap or conceal a person. They found nothing. No footprints leading away from the site, no signs of struggle, no disturbed soil, no clothing, no blood. The dogs showed interest near the tent, then lost the scent within 15 feet. It was as if Emma had simply vaporized. But her belongings told a different story. Inside the tent, her backpack was packed, not halfway, not thrown together, fully, carefully packed, clothes folded, food sealed in a bear canister, her journal zipped into a side pocket, her phone, dead, wrapped in a plastic bag at the bottom. The ranger who inventoried the items said it looked like someone preparing to leave, not someone who had already left. And then there was the message. He listens. It was written in black eyeliner on the tent floor near the door. The letters were shaky, uneven, but deliberate. Not panicked, not rushed, careful. Investigators photographed it, they swabbed it, confirmed it was Emma's eyeliner, found in a small toiletry bag near her sleeping bag. But they couldn't explain why she would write it, or when, or what it meant. One of the search and rescue volunteers, a man named Ken Purcell, said he felt uncomfortable the moment he saw it, not because of the words themselves, because of where they were positioned, right by the door, as if she had been lying on her stomach, facing out, watching something. He also noticed the tent's interior smelled strange, not decay. Not mildew, something chemical, faint but distinct, almost like hand sanitizer or cleaning alcohol. The scent disappeared once they opened the tent fully. No one could identify its source. On September 20th, the search expanded. The FBI sent 2 agents. Local news picked up the story. Volunteers from surrounding towns arrived. The helicopter made 3 additional passes. They checked every drainage, every ridge, every logging road within 10 miles. They found Emma's satellite communicator on September 21st. It was lying in the middle of a deer trail, approximately 2 miles southwest of her campsite. The device was functional, fully charged, but it had been deliberately powered off. The emergency SOS button had not been pressed. Why would she turn it off? The trail where they found it led toward an old logging road, abandoned since the 1980s. The road connected to a network of unmarked routes used occasionally by hunters or teenagers looking for isolated places to party. But in late September, the area was empty. No vehicles, no fresh tire tracks, no evidence anyone had been there in weeks. Except for one thing. A volunteer searcher named Aaron Lim noticed it on the afternoon of the 22nd. He was walking the logging road, checking the ditches on either side, when he saw a faint disturbance in the gravel. Not a footprint, something dragged. He followed it for 30 feet. The drag marks were irregular, shallow, but continuous. They led to a widening in the road where vehicles could turn around. There he found a cigarette butt, Marlboro Red, smoked recently based on the lack of weather damage. He also found a small plastic bottle, empty. The label had been peeled off, but residue suggested it had contained some kind of solvent or cleaning agent. Aaron marked the location and radioed it in. Investigators returned and collected the items. They ran the cigarette for DNA. It came back to a man named David Fenton Krieg. David Krieg was 47 years old. He lived in Estacada, Oregon, about 35 miles from the campground. He had a record, 2 prior arrests, one for stalking in 2012, another for assault in 2015. Both cases ended in plea deals, probation, restraining orders that had since expired. He worked sporadically as a landscaper. He drove a white Ford Ranger, older model, with a damaged rear bumper. And according to his phone records, he had been in the area of Mount Hood National Forest between September 7th and September 14th. When investigators went to his home on September 23rd, he wasn't there. His truck was gone. His landlord said he hadn't seen him in over a week. Neighbors said the same. One mentioned seeing him load something into his truck bed late at night on September 13th or 14th. Something large covered with a tarp. They issued a warrant. They distributed his photo. They started checking motels, campgrounds, and known associates. They found the truck 2 days later. It was parked behind a closed gas station just outside the town of Sandy, Oregon. The hood was cold. The doors were locked. The bed was empty, except for a coil of yellow nylon rope and a plastic tarp, both of which had been recently cleaned. Forensic teams processed the vehicle. They found traces of blood in the truck bed, type O positive, Emma's blood type. They also found hair, long brown, consistent with Emma's, and they found something else, a small spiral notebook tucked under the passenger seat. Inside were dates, locations, short, cryptic phrases. September 7th, arrived, Site 7, alone. September 8th, routine, writes outside, doesn't walk far. September 9th, stays close, very quiet. September 10, checked perimeter, she doesn't notice. September 11, no one else here. The entries stopped on September 12th. The next page was torn out. David Krieg was found on September 27th in a motel just outside Portland. He did not resist arrest. He asked for a lawyer immediately. He said nothing. His clothes were clean. His hands were clean. He showed no signs of injury. In his motel room, investigators found Emma's driver's license, her debit card, and a silver ring she had been wearing when she arrived at the campground. but they did not find Emma. Krieg's lawyer maintained his client's innocence. The evidence was circumstantial. Yes, he had been near the campground. He liked to hike. The notebook was his, but the entries didn't prove anything. He took notes. He liked observing people. It wasn't illegal. The blood in the truck could have come from an animal he'd transported. The hair could have been transferred inadvertently. The prosecution disagreed. They had the notebook. They had the items belonging to Emma. They had his history. They had the timeline. But without Emma, without a body, the case was fragile. Krieg sat in county jail awaiting trial. Investigators continued searching the forest. Weeks passed, then months. Nothing. And then, on November 4th, a hunter found something. He was tracking a deer through a ravine about 6 miles northeast of Silverwood Campground when he saw fabric caught on a branch. A jacket. Women's size small, North Face, dark green. It matched the description of what Emma had been wearing. Search teams returned to the area. They expanded their search radius. On November 6th, they found more. A shoe, a torn piece of a shirt, and then buried under a thin layer of soil and leaves at the base of a steep embankment, they found her. Emma Coates had been dead for weeks. The autopsy revealed she had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Her injuries were consistent with being struck multiple times with a heavy object. There were also signs of restraint. Ligature marks on her wrists, bruising on her arms and torso. She had fought. The medical examiner estimated she had been killed sometime between September 12th and September 14th. Her body had been moved post-mortem. The location where she was found was not the location where she had died. But investigators still had questions. The tent, the message, the careful packing of her belongings, the scent inside, none of it fit a straightforward abduction and murder. One detective, a woman named Laura Ortiz, began reviewing the timeline again. She focused on the tent, on the fact that it had been zipped from the inside, on the message written on the floor. She went back to the campground. Site 7 looked different in November. The leaves had fallen, the underbrush had thinned, visibility was better. Laura walked the perimeter slowly. She checked the embankment behind the tent. She checked the creek bed. She checked the trees. And then she found it. Scratched into the bark of a Douglas fir about 40 feet from where the tent had been, barely visible unless you were looking for it, was a symbol, a crude circle with a line through it. Beneath it, initials, DK. Laura took photos. She walked farther. She found another mark on a tree closer to the access road, then another. 5 in total, forming a loose perimeter around Site 7. David Krieg had been marking his territory. During trial preparation, forensic analysts re-examined everything from the tent, the eyeliner message, the scent, the positioning of her belongings. A new theory emerged. Emma had been alive inside that tent for days after September 12th. Krieg had kept her there, not physically restrained inside the tent itself, but under threat. He had stayed nearby, hidden in the forest, watching, waiting, controlling her through fear. The packed backpack suggested she had been told she was leaving. The message on the floor suggested she had tried to signal anyone that she was in danger, but she had been too afraid to run, too afraid to scream, because he was always listening. The chemical smell was likely chloroform or a similar substance, used intermittently to subdue her. And then, on September 12th or 13th, something changed. Maybe she tried to escape. Maybe she tried to fight. Maybe he simply decided he was done. He killed her, he moved her body, he cleaned the truck, he kept small items as trophies, and then he waited to see if anyone would find her. David Krieg was convicted on November 18, 2024. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He never testified, he never explained, he never admitted anything. But in an interview with a psychiatrist conducted months after his sentencing, he said something that investigators still think about. He was asked why he targeted Emma. He said, "She wanted to be alone." Silverwood Campground is still open. Site 7 is still available for reservation. The Forest Service has added signage encouraging campers to check in daily and to carry emergency communication devices at all times. Emma's family created a foundation in her name. It provides safety resources for solo travelers, particularly women who camp or hike in remote areas. Claire Coates has spoken publicly once. She said her sister loved the wilderness. She loved silence. She loved the feeling of being far away from everything. But she also said Emma had told her something a few weeks before her trip. She said she felt like she was being watched. Not at home, not at work, just sometimes, in parking lots, at coffee shops, a feeling, a presence. She had laughed about it, called it paranoia, writer's imagination. Claire said she wishes her sister had listened to that feeling. The last entry in Emma's journal, dated September 11th, read, "Something feels wrong. I don't know why. There's no one here. I've checked. The forest is empty, but I keep hearing footsteps at night, just outside the tent. Slow, deliberate, like someone circling. I told myself it's an animal, deer probably, but deer don't stop and wait. I thought about leaving, but I feel ridiculous. I came here to be alone. I can't run just because I'm nervous. I'll stay. I'll finish what I came to do. I'm sure it's nothing."